weather, and into the evening, well, the showers will really get going across this Channel coast during Thursday evening and overnight. Now, these showers will be lively with hail and thunder, could bring some particularly heavy rain once again to southern England, and that's a cause for concern. So a lively night to come in the south, but elsewhere actually the winds ease, clear spells, and Friday morning starts off colder compared with quite a number of mornings we've had recently. In fact, you'd have to go back to the second week of October to see a similar chill in the air, a touch of frost in places, but after that cold start, it's a bright one. Plenty of blue skies around on Friday, further showers in the west, but Friday looks like the most settled day of the next few days because more wind and rain is on its way on Saturday, clearing to showers on Sunday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hey, welcome along. On tonight's Mark Steyn Show, the hits just keep on coming. Here's Sam Smith and Adele. Oh, wait, no, sorry, it's Matt Hancock and Therese Coffey.
Yeah,
That's Matt Hancock and Therese Coffey getting down, which is not a sentence I ever thought I'd find myself uttering. Nevertheless, don't stop me now. Are words to live by for our depraved political class. They're floating around in ecstasy, having a good time as everything around them collapses. We've got it all tonight. Blundering experts, pitiful U-turns, the birth dearth, and Albanians. Albanians everywhere, because if there's one thing everybody needs, it's more Albanians. William Clouston, Laura Perrins, Lois Perry, Laura Dodsworth are on deck, plus the most vital part of the show, all the more important when we live in the constant swirl of a blizzard of lies. Your comments and questions, email me, anything you want. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can Twitter me @gbnews. But first, as ever, the latest news with Polly Middlehurst. Polly.
Mark, thank you. Good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight. 2 Metropolitan Police officers have been sentenced to 3 months in prison for sending grossly offensive messages with Wayne Couzens before he murdered Sarah Everard. And a warning, the following pictures, if you're watching on TV, do contain some flash photography. PC Jonathan Cobban, former PC Joel Borders, shared messages of a racist, homophobic and misogynistic nature in a WhatsApp group in 2019. The pair have been bailed ahead of an appeal against their convictions at the High Court. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has urged police chiefs to take action to change the culture within the police force after a report found serious failures in vetting officers and staff. After examining 8 forces, the police watchdog found officers who'd previously been convicted of domestic abuse or accused of sexual assault were taken on and employed. It says it found a common culture of misogyny, sexism and predatory behaviour towards female officers. The report author, Inspector of Constabulary Matt Parr, told GB News the findings are disappointing.
Is vetting strict enough? And the answer is no. That means there's a too great a chance of the wrong people joining. Secondly, did the police deal with misconduct strictly enough? The answer to that is also no. That means too many of the wrong people are allowed to stay in the forces. And thirdly, what is a culture of misogyny and sexualised, predatory sometimes behaviour towards women, like in policing? And the answer to that is not good at all.
In other news today, Rishi Sunak has conceded that not enough asylum claims have been processed, but he says action is being taken to fix that. Mr Sunak, who's been under pressure to sack his Home Secretary Suella Braverman, defended her during Prime Minister's questions in the Commons today, saying they're both on the same page when it comes to tackling migration. Labour, meanwhile, have accused the Conservatives of breaking the asylum system. And the Home Secretary has been warned that Kent is at breaking point as a result of the migrant crisis. The leaders of 14 councils have written to Suella Braverman, advising her of the risk of far-right violence at the overcrowded Manston processing centre in Kent. And today, reporters said a young girl threw a message over the fence, writing about conditions inside. The note said there were pregnant women and sick detainees and 50 families that had been held there for more than 30 days. The United States is accusing North Korea of covertly supplying Russia with a significant number of artillery shells for its war in Ukraine. The White House says Pyongyang is trying to obscure the shipments by funneling them through countries like Africa and the Middle East. In September, North Korea said it had never supplied Russia with weapons or ammunition and had no plans to do so. Meanwhile, after suspending shipments, Russia has also announced it'll resume its participation in the UN-brokered Black Sea deal to export grain. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. And now it's time for Mark Steyn.
Thank you, Polly. My main problem with the loathsome Matt Hancock being on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, is that thanks to Matt Hancock and his chums, Millions and millions of people in Britain and around the Western world have spent the last 3 years living in a bloody awful reality show. I'm a non-celebrity. Get me out of here. But there is no way out of here. It's a reality show with no season finale. Matt Hancock got a little too non-socially distanced with his quote-unquote aide and wound up getting voted off the cabinet, but the rest of his ilk are determined to make I'm a non-celebrity, there's no way out of here the new normal. In case you haven't noticed, daily life is getting more and more like I'm a Celebrity. Lockdown is basically the big budget version of the show, where instead of just finding a little corner of the outback to keep you holed up in, they just turn the whole of Australia into a prison. All the things they do on I'm a Celeb, they want to force you to do in perpetuity. The new diet that Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, the Irish government, the Dutch government, the Canadian government, that nice young lady from Peter who was on with Nigel half an hour ago, the new diet that all those nice people want you to eat is basically the menu straight out of I'm a Celebrity's bush tucker trials. Green ants, cockroaches, crickets, mealworms. The new money and your access to it will be straight out of I'm a Celebrity's digital dingo dollars, to which access depends on you performing the tasks you're assigned, just like on I'm a Celebrity. We will also have immunity challenges, where you agree to weaken your immune system in return for keeping your job or getting a week at your beach condo in Spain. If you're a fan of that show, you'll know that medic Bob McCarran has retired after 20 years, and he's going to be replaced by an unseen medic, just like your nice old family doctor has been replaced by an unseen and unseeable GP in the NHS. Matt Hancock and his chums have turned much of the planet into I'm a non-celebrity, get me out of here, and they have no plans to stop now. Yeah, it doesn't grow on you, does it? That's Matt Hancock and Therese Coffey boogieing, which is also not a sentence I ever thought I'd find myself uttering. If there were a poll asking who are the two people on the planet you would least like to see boogieing, I'm pretty confident that Matt and Therese would win it in a clean sweep. Nevertheless, my problem with Hancock is not that he's doing some stupid reality show, but that he's imposed its crappy format on the rest of us. Meanwhile, some of us prefer the exciting new reality show, I'm an Albanian, Get Me Into Here, in which every night the crack game show impresarios of the Royal National Lifeboat Institution ferry 1,000 game young male asylum seekers into the world's largest asylum, the United Kingdom, to see if they can survive for the next half century or so until their application is heard. They have to live on a diet of simple, basic foods from the room service menu at the Grade 2 listed Stoke Rochford Hall in Lincolnshire. And instead of, that's where they have to eke out their bush tucker in the conservatory there. And instead of dingo dollars, they have to earn rishi riches by agreeing to perform exciting challenges like taking your free mobile down to the local primary school and live streaming the playground break back to the other lads. Do you know Robert Jenrick? I hope I got that right. Me neither. I don't know him at all. But he's a Minister of State at the Home Office. And the Spectator is tipping him as the guy who'll be taking over from Suella Braverman when the PM fires her next Tuesday. This Jenrick chap was on Sky today and not entirely on message with his nominal boss, the Home Secretary. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick asked about Braverman's invasion remarks, clearly unimpressed by Home Secretary's choice of words. In jobs like mine, you have to choose words carefully, and I would never demonize people in search for a better life. Unquote. Oh, wait, what's that I hear? Oh, it's a faint pre-echo of the Tory vote falling to statistically undetectable levels at the next election if Mr. Jenrick continues to be allowed out in public. You sanctimonious nincompoop. It's precisely because in jobs like yours you have to choose words carefully that you shouldn't sentimentalise public policy. Immigration is a public policy like any other, just like highways, just like schools, like anything. It's supposed to operate to the benefit of the people who are already here. Now, this Twit Jenrick statement is true to this extent. People in search of a better life. Remember what he said, because that's a sentimentalized way of acknowledging that they're not genuine asylum seekers, they're not genuine refugees, they're economic migrants. They want a better life. So what parts of the UK economy are they hoping to make their, quote, better life in? Albanian men now make up about 60% of the nightly dinghy traffic. Do they run Albanian restaurants, Albanian dry cleaners, Albanian software developers? No, but Albanians now run the cannabis and cocaine trade in every corner of this kingdom. You fool, Jenrick. That's a much better life. They can make far more money running the coke trade in the UK than they can back in the Balkans. They also run the highly lucrative sex trade in London, and that's a much more lucrative sex trade than in Tirana. And in London, it's serviced by girls from the human trafficking business, which they also run. Prostitution, human smuggling, drug dealing. It's certainly a better life for them, in Mr. Jenrick's idiotic words, but not so much for His Majesty's Treasury, because they don't pay taxes. And they're shipping hundreds of millions of pounds back to Albania every year. Robert Jenrick is a fool and a dissembler, so naturally he's being tipped as the next Home Secretary. Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. William Clouston is the leader of the Social Democratic Party, which has just announced an electoral pact with the Reform Party. William, this issue is make and break for the Tories, is it not?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think probably about 80 Tory MPs, that's the range. If they get this policy right, the next election, they may hold on to 80 or 90 MPs. If they get it wrong, I think they're on the line. And I don't have much faith in them getting it right, I'm afraid.
Is that because they actually don't want to get it right? I mean, there's a huge gulf between their voters and these fool ministers like Mr. Jenrick.
Oh, well, there certainly is. I mean, you mentioned the voters there. The voters in 2019 voted, who voted Tory, voted for a party that promised that they would have control of the borders, but they're operating evidently an open border, and no one voted for that. I mean, there are people you'll find in the universities who argue for open borders, but the general public certainly don't want it, and it's a major democratic issue.
Why do the institutions of the state, like the Border Force is actually now actively dissolving the border. The Royal National Lifeboat Institution, some poor chap in trouble at sea had to be rescued by fishermen because the RNLI is now a taxi service from French waters to the English coast. Why do these institutions go along with it?
I don't actually blame the institution. I don't blame the RNLI or any of these people. I blame the people right at the top. The system is structured to fail. What is not well known, and it should be better known, is that the Rwanda scheme is basically just a publicity stunt. Their own advisors would have told them that. It can't be done. The real political choice on this issue is, do you want border sovereignty, or do you want to stay in the 51 Refugee Convention and the 53 Convention? If you want to stay in those conventions, I'm afraid you can't have border sovereignty. Why? Because the world is full of people that can have a claim, and the private sector, as you might call it, criminal gangs would be another way of describing it, will get them here. I think if you just get your calculator out, how many people in the world, Mark, would qualify? Any Chinese Democrat, half the population of Afghanistan, any gay person in sub-Saharan Africa in many states would qualify. Basically, the system is broken, and I want a politician, I want Braverman, actually, who I have some sympathy for, to have the clarity to level with the public and say, you either stay in these conventions or, you know, the question of border sovereignty is gone.
Well, we're undergoing a huge demographic transformation, unlike anything seen in the United Kingdom, even in the post-war years when many fellow British subjects came to these islands from other parts of the empire in the 50s, 60s, 70s. What's happening now is on a completely different scale. 1 in 6 people now in England and Wales is born outside the UK. How long can this go on for before it becomes academic because the nation's lost?
Well, if you run an open border and you don't even have control, then you've lost it. You've literally lost the plot. We're not being governed. I'm very concerned about the broader question of orderliness. You know, you're not being governed properly. But on the question of migration and immigration generally, I mean, obviously, we're talking on the channel migrants. We're talking about illegal migration, people who are arriving unsolicited. They're actually, it's quite a rational choice for them because they've got a very good chance of staying and they get access to, you know, health services and housing and have, in the end, quite a good chance of employment. But no, on the broader question, we've become addicted to mass immigration. 1 million people were granted migration visas last year, in the same way that we've become addicted to debt. And I think these two things are probably slightly interlinked. It's a way of not facing the realities. We've got 5.3 million people, British citizens, on out-of-work benefits. It's easier and cheaper and more lazy just to import people. I don't think we can go on like that, Mark. I think we've argued for a mass immigration pause, a generation-long pause. I think it would be, you might call it an integration pause. You might argue strongly in favour for social solidarity. I think we need that, and if we don't face up to it and elect people that want it, we're in trouble.
No, the United States had that from, I think it was 1926 to 1965. So they basically had 4 decades to assimilate all the people they'd brought in the 1890s and the beginning of the 20th century. But there's no will even to assimilate here. Basically, we're just having an economic argument about this in which we're being told, oh, this is fantastic. All the work is going to be done by people from somewhere else, as if that's a normal, healthy condition for society. And you'll hear Conservatives make that ludicrous, reductive economic argument too.
I don't think, I don't think the economic argument actually stands anyway. The SDP is a party of the economic left, and I think one of the, two major consequences of mass immigration on the British worker is, first, downward pressure on wages, which is obvious if you understand supply and demand, and also a massive disincentivise to train people. Why bother training British workers when you can just import people? But that aside, and I agree, I think many of these questions must be dealt with in terms of cultural questions as well. What's been the plan that Britain's had for integration? Nothing. It's been basic negligence. Things will work out. Well, as I say, I think there's a very strong case. The people that advised us on the idea of a mass immigration pause, I think, are very well-intentioned. I think it's a good policy. We should have a look at it.
Yeah, well, just in political terms, is there an opening for your party here? You've done some deal with the Reform Party for the next election. But because the problem here, just in political terms, regardless of the merits, is that this in particular sums up the impotence of a government that is in office but not in power. So far, everyone's more excited about Suella Braverman using the word invasion than doing anything to stop the invasion. Is there an opening for a party that would take this issue seriously and actually act as opposed to doing nothing for 12 years like the Tories?
Well, we're appallingly badly governed, and the prime reason for that is the electoral system. If we change the electoral system, I think actually we're headed for a serious crisis, and I think one of the consequences may well be a change in the system. But until we do, we'll get continued parliaments, which don't remotely reflect mainstream opinion. I mean, the SDP is only reflecting mainstream opinion. We occasionally get called extreme on this, which is absurd. All we're doing is reflecting what about 60 or 70% British citizens want. And you won't get it. You won't get any change unless you change the electoral system, which is what we aim to do. Now we've come to a little deal with the Reform Party in the next election. It's quite a limited deal. Stand down in key target seats for both parties. We disagree with them on economics, but it's worth trying. And I think the British public are crying out for something different. On this issue, Mark, I have to say the Tories have messed up terribly. But do you honestly believe that the Lib Dems and the Labour Party would be better? I think they'd probably be worse.
No, that's quite true. We're going to have you back to talk about that coalition and the positioning for the next election, because there are people who would like a wider choice. Thank you very much, William Clouston. I said yesterday, and we touched on it just then, that culture trumps economics, and that's true every time. The hyper-rationalists of our public discourse have great difficulty grasping this, so they look at the cratering UK fertility rate, and they say we need to bring in more strapping young Albanian lads to be the children we couldn't be bothered having ourselves. Laura Perrins wrote a terrific riposte to this ridiculous argument over at The Conservative Woman, and she joins us now. It's quite incredible, isn't it? The current number of people arriving on the southern shore every night is equivalent to about 60% of the babies born in England and Wales that day. These are literally the kids we couldn't be bothered having.
Good evening, Mark. Yes, the piece I wrote today was a reply to a piece that was in the Times actually a few weeks ago. And it had bothered me for those few weeks. I was finally able to reply to it. And it was this idea that, as most readers will know, the fertility rate across the West is collapsing. But according to this opinion person in the Times, he said, don't worry. Because what we'll do is we'll just run loads of immigration. We'll just have an open border. And although that will solve our future economic problems, because obviously in general, you need, children to grow up and become workers and contribute to the tax system. He said, don't worry about that. Low fertility rate is fine. We'll just import all the foreign workers. And I just couldn't believe he was sort of equating an adult, as I said in the piece, whether it was foreign or not, to a child and to children. And I really resent how this fertility issue is being discussed solely in terms of economics. Because as you say, I think culture trumps economics. And for me, at least, even if it didn't have an economic problem, children are valuable in and of themselves. They're not something that just can be replaced by, a worker that you have stolen from somebody else. Somebody else has taken the time and energy to raise that child to become an adult. And now it seems the West are just saying, you know what, we're just going to steal everybody else's grown-up kids and then we're done.
Yeah, Homo economicus is hyper-rationalism taken to ludicrous extremes. I've been in villages in northern Italy where the schoolhouse is now empty because there are no kids. I've been in villages on the East German plain where the same thing has happened. There's actually something sick in a society that has given up having children, isn't there?
Yeah, without being too sentimental about it, as you said, you shouldn't be sentimental about public policy. But I just don't think people understand what you would actually lose if you live in a society that has fewer and fewer children. And although, as I said in the piece, I don't think we're looking at Children of Men just yet, which is, by the way, one of my favourite movies. I know a book also. You just lose so many ideas. You lose a tremendous amount of innovation, because this is the other thing. People always think about it in terms of economics, but actually the Western economy now is nearly entirely dependent on ideas. Who has the idea for, the iPhone? Who has the idea for the next great change that improves our lives? It's the idea that really counts, because pretty much anybody can make the product or service. And ideas will always come from young people. And it's their energy that you need. And as you say, I've never been to Japan, but I have no desire to go there, because I guess it's a bit like maybe a seaside town in Britain now that has very very, very few children and is dominated by retired people who go and want to retire by the sea, which is fair enough. But what you have to ask yourself is this really the future that you want, where, if you don't have any children, you don't have any families. So you're not just looking at a child-free society, you're looking at a family-free society. And you're also looking at a hyper-liberal society, because I think statistically you do get more conservative if you have a family, because you obviously want to pass on broadly speaking, more conservative values. You will want to retain institutions, which by definition are usually conservative, for the next generation. So the fewer children we have, the fewer adults with children we have, I think you're looking at a very selfish society and a very cold society. As I said in my piece, no grandparent has ever said, gosh, I can't wait for my foreign worker to open up their Christmas presents on Christmas Day. I can't wait to see their little faces. It brings me such joy. Nobody will ever say that. I think we should be very cautious as well about, do you really want to be around adults, just adults, who don't want to spend the time and energy that it takes to raise the next generation? Because I would rather not be part of that society, no matter how many workers we have.
No, it is actually faintly creepy. It's a breach of all healthy societies are a compact between the past, the present and the future. And the Japanese at least understand that if you make robot nurses to look after you in the old folks' homes, those robot nurses don't bring other issues. It's hard to imagine that, for example, all these Albanians we're settling in Britain now would be willing to pay high taxes to support the last English, Scottish, Irish, Welsh people tottering about. In other words, the social compact on which high welfare societies depend breaks down once the young people are completely different from the old people.
Yes, exactly. There's no link between the generations. There's no sense of duty from the younger people, of which there'll be much fewer, to say, well, we were looked after when we were kids, when we were annoying, they put up with us and they raised us. So it's now my duty to look after my parents and my grandparents. As you say, all those contacts, all those that sense of family and community duty is lost when you just have a completely atomized society, when you have no common memories, when you have no common bonds. The sense that you should actually pay tax. And remember, the tax burden on the next generation, as that generation gets fewer and fewer, is going to be enormous, so enormous that I suspect that the few, young people coming into adults, the rising generation, if they can leave, I suspect they will leave, because the tax burden on them is going to become so great.
No, you're absolutely right. Young Britons are going to be checking out and finding somewhere. They're not going to want to pay 70-80% tax rates to support this huge swollen number of geezers. Thank you very much, Laura. It's always a pleasure. Up next, your thoughts on all this, GB Views at gbnews.uk. Plus, this is exciting. Rishi Sunak has only been in number 10 a week, but he's already done his first flip-flop. Lois Perry's here on that, and Laura Dodsworth on Rule by Experts. All coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle, Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
GB News is the People's Channel, so if we're not listening to the people, we're not doing it right. Thunderlips says, look to Hungary's plan designed to promote marriage and families. Hungarian women with 4 children or more will be exempted for life from paying income tax. As part of the measures, young couples will be offered interest-free loans to be cancelled once they have 3 children. I was in Hungary a few months ago. I tell you what I like about Hungary is it still feels like Hungary. Not a particularly crowded gate at some anonymous international airport, which much of southern England and, well, actually much of the country in general now feels like. But Sean says, I thought you lot were against the population growing. And Barry says, I thought Mark Steyn viewers said we were full, which is why you don't want immigrants. Or is the real reason you don't want immigrants because you're all racist? Well, these kind of glib, aha, gotcha lines, they might be fun in your school debating society, but they're actually total rubbish. It's not about the population growing. You need to have 2.1 kids to keep the population stable. That's allowing for, the 0.1 to die of childhood myocarditis. You need to have 2.1 kids to keep the population just the same, not growing at all. Once you have 1.5 kids, you're in population decline. And this, I feel sad about that. I don't have a drop of English, Scottish or Welsh blood in me, but I feel sad at the thought of a great nation, a great people and a great culture dying before our eyes, which is what's going on when you have a 1.5 fertility rate. This is a great nation. It gave the world Shakespeare. It gave the world Keats and Shelley. It gave the world cricket. It gave the world Scotch eggs. It gave the world Welsh rarebit. It gave the world tea cakes. English, Scottish, Welsh, Irish tea cakes. There's all kinds of tea cakes. And it's going out of business. And that's sad. And it's not an opportunity. I thought you didn't want the population to grow. The population's shrinking. Same thing in Ukraine. There are not going to be any Ukrainians. They'll be fighting over a wasteland. Same thing in Japan. The Japanese are going out of business. That's sad and weird and odd and psychologically unhealthy. Rishi Sunak. Sunak sunk. That's Nigel's new line, and I quite like it. He's performed his first U-turn, and I believe that's a new record because he's beaten Liz Truss, who waited, I think, a fortnight or so before her first flip-flop. Just last week, our new PM announced he wouldn't be attending COP27, which is this month's big climate beano, at the Egyptian holiday resort of Sharm el-Sheikh, because he was too busy working on his November mini-budget to make things marginally less despair-inducing for you. So Shooting the Breeze with John Kerry and Leonardo DiCaprio would just have to wait. The climate heavies then got out the old tire iron, took Rishi into the back alley and demanded to know what part of Greta Thunberg's imposing the usual three-line whip that Rishi didn't understand. So Prime Minister Jelly Spine McSquishpants caved. This is what he tweeted, quote, "There is no long-term prosperity without action on climate change. That's not true. There is no energy security without investing in renewables. That's not true either. That is why I will attend COP27 next week. And that's not true." Just to finish it all up, Lois Perry of car26.org is here with me. It is all yours, Lois. Go for it.
Wow, what an introduction. Good evening, Mark. Yeah, this is actually his third flip-flop, isn't it? Because we've had fracking, and we've also had, there was going to be a bonfire of the vanities of all the EU regulations. So yeah, this is number 3. But it makes me think, was he ever not going to attend? I don't know. Maybe it's all part of some bizarre triple bluff. You know, oh, I'm not going to go, I am going to go, I'm not going to go. Of course he was going to go, because he's a globalist, complete fanatic about net zero, who is always in the pockets of the coup, and 100% he was going to go. I'm pleased the king isn't going, but no, I don't think there was ever any question marks over undishy Rishi going to COP27 or not, to be honest.
Well, when you say you're relieved the king isn't going, I mean, that's really thin pick. We're now relieved. We're now relieved that His Majesty is not trashing the Constitution by inserting himself into a highly partisan, highly contentious political issue. I mean, that's pretty desperate, isn't it, Lois?
No, you're absolutely right. I've shocked myself. Yeah, it is thin pickings. Of course the king shouldn't be going. And to be honest, Rishi Sunak shouldn't be going either. But it would look a bit disingenuous, wouldn't it, for him, when basically he's based all of his entire lies and nonsense and his budget and all of that nonsense for the last for the last few years on the green agenda. But I'd like to exclusively reveal something tonight for your viewers, Mark. There is an alliance that has been put together of individuals, of businesses, and of some very high-profile, notable people who have been brought together by the energy crisis, not the fake climate crisis, who have been brought together to actually to form a movement, and everyone can join, and they will be doing an alternative budget, which will be published later this month. And I want the British public to be ready for net exit, which is going to be the next big thing. Forget Brexit, it's going to be net exit. And the budget will be showing everyone how we will be doing so much better. It's a pro-working people, it's a pro-everybody budget. And I can't reveal the name of the group at the moment, but I can reveal that this group has been formed, and it's going to be big, Mark. It's quite exciting, actually. We're going to take everybody on.
What do you say to those people, though, who say that net zero is the law and it cannot actually be over? Some guy on the House of Commons Select Committee or whatever it is said, you can't get out of net zero. Theresa May, the Tories passed a law, we're stuck with it, and you won't be able to unpass it because our MPs are so out of touch with the people they purport to govern.
well, you know, all laws can be overturned. We used to have laws about witchcraft and homosexuality. I mean, they've been overturned, and they were as bizarre and as wrong as any of this net zero fantasy and nonsense. The MPs in Parliament, they are in touch and they do know what's going on. They are completely brought into this because they're either scared or because they're just at the trough. And that's why we need to put our faith in people that are actually going to try and make a difference. This is a globalist movement. Everyone is scared. Everyone in Westminster is scared. There are a few MPs that are brave enough to stick their heads above the parapet, but there needs to be more. And yeah, I mean, they know it's fake. Rishi Sunak knows it's fake. The whole thing is a nonsense, and it's actually an attack on all people, but especially the working class and the middle class. They want to take us back to serfdom. They don't want us in our cars. They don't want us to own our own homes. And it is time that the people are represented, because I tell you what, they're not being represented at all by Westminster and by the elites. It's disgusting.
No, when they talk about things like electric cars, there's never going to be enough electricity. There's never going to be enough charging stations. There's not going to be enough lithium mines in Africa staffed full of 7-year-old boys with rickets getting the stuff out of the ground for us to have cars. So it's actually a way of ending individual transportation, isn't it?
Absolutely, and they know this. They know all these facts, that, as you say, there isn't enough minerals in the ground to make the amount of electric cars. And the whole renewables thing being 8 times cheaper or 9 times cheaper, whatever nonsense is come up with on that day, that's complete rubbish as well, and they know it is. It's so heavily subsidised. The figures are worked out based on figures of pre-agreed contracts, which is not how much the energy is being sold back to the grid for. It's all utter nonsense, and the MPs know this. Your viewers know or should know that the MPs know this, and they're doing it to you anyway.
Yeah, pester them about it, because they don't want you leaving. It's like lockdown forever.
It is.
You won't be able to leave the house because you'll have no motor vehicle to get into. You're going nowhere. Somebody help you, yeah, as the Bee Gees famously observed so many years ago. Thank you very much, Lois.
Thank
Stump
you.
the Steyn looms. Always a pleasure. You can ask me anything you like. gbviews@gbnews.uk. And Laura Dodsworth. After 3 years of rule by experts, how are you liking it so far? Stick around, we're coming right back.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank and, of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland, Wales,
And Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
News channel.
Did you see the Atlantic Monthly this week? Used to be one of America's most influential publications, but that was back when I wrote for it. Not sure about these days. Anyway, they had a piece in there the other day with a very arresting title. Quote, "Let's declare a pandemic amnesty. We need to forgive one another for what we did and said when we were in the dark about COVID," by Emily Oster. Who's Goldman Sachs Professor of Economics at Brown University in Rhode Island and was one of the most gung-ho lockdown zealots. Sorry, include me out. We were not, quote, in the dark about COVID. We were lied to about its origins, lied to about gain-of-function research, lied to about vaccine efficacy, lied to. And it's not a question about forgiving one another, it's about one side sticking it to the other side. There's 40,000 UK care home workers not working in care homes right now because one side told the other side you have to be double, triple, quadruple boosted with a lousy pseudo-vaccine. The pom-pom propagandists such as Philip Schofield, Jeremy Vine, Dr. Matthew Sweet are still all in on the fairy tale. So no, a pandemic amnesty doesn't quite do it for me. I can see why Professor Oster's side might want one, because the alternative is criminal prosecution and long jail terms. But we should at least learn a broader lesson about rule by experts, by the likes of Whitty and Vallance and Professor Pantsdown. Laura Dodsworth is the author of State of Fear, and she just gave a cracking speech at the Cambridge Union on this very subject, speaking for the motion, "This House has had enough of experts." Boris Johnson, I don't know whether you remember him, Laura, but he used to pride himself on being the reincarnation of Winston Churchill. And in fact, Churchill, you quoted Churchill on experts in your speech.
that's true, I did. And thank you very much for saying it was a cracking speech. Unfortunately, I was on the side that suffered a landslide loss because actually it turned out the House has not had enough of experts. Yes, in a letter to H.G. Wells, Winston Churchill warned that the very worst thing we could do is to put unlimited faith into experts. The worst thing would be for government to fall into the hands of experts. Actually, the ignorant, uninformed man knows very well what is good for him through his own objective experience of life. That's to sum up Winston Churchill's quote. I mean, it would be ludicrous to say that we've had enough of all experts or that experts don't have a place in society. I mean, if my central heating breaks down, I want an expert gas central heating plumber to fix it. If I have to go to the doctor about HRT, I would like a general practitioner and an endocrinologist to see me. They're experts. I think the problem is that so much power was put into the hands of experts. Now, experts deal in facts. and they deal in evidence, but evidence is always socially constructed. It's influenced by political and social bias. And the particular experts that I was concerned with when I wrote A State of Fear, and they're the experts that I concern myself with in the speech at Cambridge Union, are the behavioural scientists, the nudgers, because I think what they do in today's world is very important for people to understand. They nudge us into making what they deem to be the correct decisions, into the correct behaviour. Now, what they did used to look quite innocuous. They would try to work on reducing obesity, or to encourage people to smoke less, or reduce knife crimes. And they've boasted quite brazenly about helping us to lock up the biscuit tins. But what they did over the last couple of years was encourage us to lock ourselves up. And there have been much graver consequences inflicted upon all of society as a result of nudge. And the real problem with nudge, Mark, is that people don't know it's happening. So I would say it's fundamentally anti-democratic.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But what's interesting to me is that as at the Cambridge Union the other night, there are large numbers of people who are actually quite in an undeferential age where the church and the monarchy and all kinds of institutions don't command deference. This prostration before very narrow expertise is kind of a new phenomenon, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, I feel at the moment that democracy is held in some contempt. If we go back to the beginning of lockdown, just staying on that, you know, Parliament had a very short space of time to consider emergency regulations, and then many hundreds of statutory instruments were passed. That's secondary legislation. It was never really given due consideration in Parliament, so that's one sense in which we didn't hold democracy dear enough. Government politicians deferred to the science as though they should be led by science. But the evidence on COVID should have been only one factor that was taken into consideration, because lockdowns, mandates of various sorts, masks, they obviously all have other knock-on effects, which are social, cultural, economic. So I think we probably needed a much broader multidisciplinary team of experts. But it's not just about the disciplines. And I think this is an important point, because I think if you look at SAGE, if you look at the behavioural scientists, I'm going to make a sweeping generalisation, and they might be cross with me, but I think you'd be very hard-pressed to find people who would define themselves as socially conservative or libertarian or Brexiteer. I think you get quite a homogenous groupthink in these groups. And in fact, for A State of Fair, I interviewed a few experts who had been squeezed out of groups. They were told they were the wild card or they were inconvenient, and they were less relied upon in that expert setting because their views weren't as comfortable. So that's another danger with the reliance upon the experts.
Yeah, the coalition of all the talents is drawn too narrowly. But certain things could have been foreseen. For example, the damage to children by not letting them build their immune systems, by not letting them socially interact with other children. That's entirely obvious, yet apparently these guys did it to us anyway.
Well, that's a very good point. And I think a big part of the problem was that a certain type of expert is relied upon and makes their views known, and other types of experts are ignored or deplatformed or censored. Look at what happened to the Great Barrington Declaration scientists. We had an MP in this country, Neil O'Brien, who was one of the founders of a website which contained a list of scientists and journalists who were deemed guilty of wrongthink. And of course, this is dangerous because science should involve a great deal of question, and we need to be really wary of that grandiosity that says science can't be challenged. And in fact, if we'd had vigorous debates about the immune systems of children, as you say, and many other issues, we may have taken different decisions. I mean, think about Fauci. He said that it's dangerous to question science because he represents science. That's a very, very flawed and grandiose premise to take. We should never let that happen again. These are the scientists, the experts that we want to be very, very wary of indeed. But coming back to the nudges, the problem is that many of these policies that would be difficult to foist upon a population become more palatable when our psychology is leveraged. And during the pandemic, we saw fear, shame and social conformity leveraged to the hilt. Now, you might have heard of the Milgram experiment. What it basically found out is that people will kill other people with electric shocks if somebody in a white lab coat tells them to. Normally, this would be a cognitive bias we would think is quite dangerous. You know, it's not a great human trait to encourage, and yet that conformity was leveraged to the hilt. And I think that's quite odd, and that's the psychologist who did that.
Yeah, no, that's true. And you're quite right about Fauci claiming to represent science and expertise, when in fact he's a government bureaucrat who's been in the same job since 1967. So he can't take your appendix out or whatever you expect from a doctor. Thank you very much, Laura. She is... No. Laura is an expert on the subject of experts, which is what we need. That's going to do it. Dan Wootton is here to wallop your Wednesday. What you got for us, Dan?
One of the smartest women in Britain. I absolutely loved that, Mark. We've got a new member of our family tonight. Not often I want an MP on this show, but when it's the King of the North, the most outspoken MP in the country, Lee Anderson, then my opinion changed. So Lee Anderson tonight in his first segment, he's taking on Eddie Izzard, the migrant crisis, and the censorship of Winston Churchill.
He's just warming up, a little light warming up with Eddie Izzard, then on to migrants. What a match that is. Lee versus Eddie. Coming up after the weather with Dan. Stay safe, stay free.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion,